Hey everyone, thanks for coming to our presentation here at PacRim called The Importance of Non-Traditional Accessibility Testing. So I'm Greg Rogers. I am the Accessibility Project Testing Manager for Outlook Business Solutions. Just a short bio. I worked in one of the major wireless communication companies, one of the big three now, doing accessibility work. So anything from helping to release products to customers, to testing websites, to reviewing and detailing cell phones. So that was a great opportunity. And then after that, I did some contract work doing accessibility testing for a variety of industries. Here in the last few years, I've earned a couple certifications as well. One is called the Certified Professional of Accessibility Core Competencies from the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And then I also received a certification from the Department of Homeland Security. It's called the Trusted Tester, and it's basically a certification for accessibility testing. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Jeff, and he'll introduce himself as well.
Hello, my name is Jeff Singleton. I'm the co-founder of Converge Accessibility, and I've been working in the IT field for over 25 years now and been primarily focused on accessible, especially digital accessibility content or accessible content for more than half that time. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of large organizations, including some of the government organizations, as well as all the way down to little private mom and pop shops. So I've had a lot of experience with dealing with accessibility at different levels and understanding the difficulty that can come along with how to incorporate accessibility and especially the web content accessibility guidelines into your web development lifecycle. We're happy to be here today with Greg to be able to discuss the importance of non-traditional accessibility testing and how that can play into the process that you all are taking to make sure that your content is accessible as well. Now, the purpose of this presentation is really four different things. First, we want to provide an overview of the different types of testers that are out there. We're talking about maybe an able-bodied tester to those that might have different impairments and how they can be used throughout the testing process as well. And so Greg's going to cover that along with those different situations where having different testers and using them in different ways can really provide greater insight into the testing process and the results that we get. But then we also want to highlight a process that really promotes collaboration between teams because what we find is WCAG itself, those web content accessibility guidelines, are often very vague and confusing, and many times they're developer focused. So if you're a designer, you're a content creator, or even a tester, sometimes you're not sure what to do or how everybody has a role to play in that. So we want to just give you a high level idea of how you can successfully do that. And then we're going to wrap up our presentation where Greg's going to provide us a demonstration of an accessible versus an inaccessible web form. And that's really a good thing to experience. If you've never seen a screen reader in action before, you'll be able to actually get to experience what Greg gets to experience on a regular basis and be able to see the difference in the challenges that come along when you're dealing with an inaccessible piece of content as opposed to an accessible piece of content. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it back over to Greg, and he's going to start off covering with those different types of testers and the different types of assistive technologies that are out there.
Thanks, Jeff. So the first type of tester I want to talk about is actually someone in my situation. So they happen to use what's called a screen reading technology. This is for both visually impaired people like myself. I've never had any useful vision. I was born that way. But it's also used by folks that might have some cognitive impairments. So what this piece of software does is a couple things. It verbalizes the output on the screen that you're able to see, and it allows for interaction. So I can do various interactions like links, buttons, headings, all sorts of different controls. There's sort of a misperception that I can only just take a screenshot and it reads all at once and I just sort of memorize material. But for screen reader users, they actually interact using a variety of different controls. Now let's talk about screen magnification testers. So these are testers with low vision. And so a lot of times they will either increase the size of the text or images on the screen. It's sometimes up to 200% or more. You'll also see a lot of color contrast built into these pieces of software. So these are folks these are used by folks with varying visual challenges, people that are losing their vision over time, people that have lost a significant amount of vision, but have sort of stabilized. Also, folks that may be colorblind. So the color contrast can be really helpful from that perspective. So I'll talk about folks that use things like head wands and mouse sticks, as well as modified keyboards and cursors. These are folks that have some dexterity challenges. So anything from they might not have use of their hands for one reason or another, or they might have to rely on things like, even their eyes or their voice. They might use voice command as well, or various types of cursors. And so that leads us to our sort of next segue. And that is voice command, and that's used by a variety of folks. So someone like me who's visually impaired, I just find voice command, which is different from the screen reader. Voice command is like Siri and Google Assistant, or it could be Dragon Naturally Speaking to actually get things done, or it could be used for someone, as I just mentioned, that has a motor disability, or a variety of other challenges that they might use. So now let's talk just a little bit about testing as a team. So when possible, it's better to have a diverse testing base to cover a variety of different environments. So someone that might be hearing impaired and requires captions or transcripts, someone who might have no vision like myself who uses a screen reader, or someone that might be motor impaired that they can't use a mouse and are relying upon the keyboard to do interaction throughout the website. Sometimes problems that affect one group of users should actually be tested by another group. And so let's talk through a couple of those examples. Someone with complete sight loss like myself may have trouble determining the accuracy of an audio description, because I might be able to say, hey, it's there, but I won't be able to accurately determine, hey, are the visuals actually being depicted as I would need to see them? So this might be tested with someone that has motor challenges, or an able-bodied tester as well. So conversely, someone with hearing loss may have difficulty assessing the accuracy of a transcript for either a podcast or a multimedia. And so this is where someone like me, who happens to be able to hear all the audio in a video, but maybe not be able to see it, I could read a transcript and test for all the audio to make sure that's being portrayed. And that would include all the sounds that you hear that someone that might have challenges with hearing may not be able to access. So when you open a testing pool to those who are real world users of assistive technology, you gain a much deeper insight into the needs of individuals with varying disabilities and varying environments. So best practices, I'll just cover this just a little bit. You'll hear a little bit about manual and automated testing, and this is something that you'll learn more about on your accessibility journey, and we don't have a whole lot of time to cover today, but automated testing can capture maybe 20 to maybe at most 40% of errors. And so manual testing really will give you a real world experience of what given users experience, whether it's someone like me who happens to not have any sight, or someone that may not be able to use their hands, someone who might have some hearing loss. And one thing to keep in mind as you're doing some of this testing is it not only benefits people with disabilities, but it also could be valuable for people in different situations. So someone might be watching a video and don't have access to sound because they're in a library or in a meeting. And so the captions and transcripts might be really helpful for people in that situation. Someone might have broken their hand or broken an arm in an intramural basketball game. I know March Madness is coming up. And so And so using voice command or various other ways of accessing a digital property like a website may be beneficial for folks like that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and he's going to just talk a little bit about the current model and why it's broken and the process of how to fix it.
Yeah, so when we talk about the current model is broken, what are we really talking about? Well, if you notice on the screen, we see the little stick figure standing next to a broken water pipe, and all the water's coming out on the floor, and he's kind of wondering what to do about it. Well, that's kind of the way our current accessibility consulting works today. You might have a website that needs to be reviewed. So you might hire a third-party consultant to come in and do some testing, and you might find out, well, these are all the errors that we have. And so you give those errors back to your developers. They go back and they fix them. And 6 to 12 months later or so, you find out that your website is pretty much inaccessible again after all that time spent and resources that you dumped into actually fixing that site. Well, why is that? Well, that's because that model is reactive. It comes after the fact. You create the website, you create that content, you put it out there, then you go out and you discover that there's issues as part of that website. And as we mentioned, that reactive nature just means that you're going to have to be repeating that process over and over again. But really what we want to do is, instead of focusing on this temporary fix that this current model gives us, this reactive model, all those fixes are just going to be temporary because we're not getting back to where the source is for all these issues and where they really should be focused on from the very beginning. And when we don't actually start changing the way this model is, it ends up exposing us to greater risk because we're never going to really get any progress as far as making our content accessible. We might do a little bit, but it's usually short-lived because it's just not getting to the right people. So really what we want to do then is we want to get to the source of those problems. We want to make sure that things are going where they're supposed to be going, so that the right people are touching the accessibility nature of everything at the right time, so that that can be maintained throughout that web content development lifecycle. So how do we go about doing that really? Well, that's where better requirements come in. And what do we mean by that? So we do have the web content accessibility guidelines. Those are basically a set of requirements. The guidelines are standards that we're supposed to follow. But again, if we're only looking at those in a reactive way, it's not really getting us where we need to be. So what we want to do is create these better requirements in the sense that we can establish something within our dev environment, within our content creation environment. And that's something that usually we want to have in-house, unless you're hiring out the third party to do a lot of this work, a lot of different third parties. But if you have all this in-house where it's being designed, created, and posted on the website, it's something you really want to bring in. And a lot of organizations have done that. They've gone in and they've looked at these guidelines and they've customized them for the way that their group works, and then they set this type of process internally. But usually what happens is, if an organization does go to that effort, which oftentimes they don't, what usually happens is those guidelines often become out of date fairly quickly, because once the initial effort is done, nobody's really making sure that those are being maintained and updated as new techniques and new requirements come out and things like that. So really what we want to do is, if we find ourselves in that situation, either we need to have this kind of guidance, or either we already have this guidance in-house, but it's not being maintained, then we might want to look at getting somebody else to come in and look at that as well for us. And we do have a product that we work with called WebAlign that does just that. But ultimately, this process and that product WebAlign, it provides guidance to all the different people or team members that are involved in that web content lifecycle. So for example, you want your UX designers to be able to know what's required from an accessibility standpoint and make sure that their designs and their mock-ups that they're providing to the developers include that notation. For example, heading structure. Well, here's your heading structure. This should be an H1. This should be an H2. If you don't include that kind of information within your designs, then you're just leaving it up to the developers to either guess at it or worse yet, not do anything and maybe not mark it up at all as a header. So we want to empower our developers to make sure we're helping them create accessible content as well. And that really does start at the design. But that also includes the other creative teams, such as the media creators, the videos and the graphic artists, as well as those people who are creating the copy or the content that's going to go on the site. They have to know the role they play, and they have to know what's expected of them, so that, for example, if I'm creating copy for a particular page and I'm going to include images as part of that, well, as the person who's creating that content, I know whether or not that image is decorative or whether or not that image plays a key role into the content that's being presented. So the responsibility of creating or deciding whether there should be alt text associated with that image should really fall on me at that point, because I'm the person that's putting that image in there. So if I know that that's part of my responsibility, and I know what I need to do, then I can provide that alt text along to the developers who are going to be placing that onto the website. So again, the developer doesn't have to guess or wonder whether or not this should have empty alt text, whether this image should have alt text at all, or a lot of times developers, if they're not aware of that, they might just leave it with no alt text on that image, which just leads to more problems for assistive technologies like screen readers. And of course, our quality assurance teams also need to be aware of the role they play, because they have to be able to go in and validate that the content has been created in an accessible way. But again, you can't expect them to make a lot of judgment calls, such as the alt text that we talked about earlier, or the header structure, things like that. They too can benefit from having that information that comes from those creative groups, such as the UX designers and the copy creators. So that kind of process is not something we see used very often today when it comes to accessibility. But if we're going to break that broken cycle that is currently happening now, where you're just repeating and spinning your wheels, this is really the way to do it. And this approach isn't that difficult. I mean, it's difficult to maybe implement it in the sense of creating it. But again, we've already have some resources out there that will do that for us, or at least help us along that path, such as WebAlign, which you can find out more information later on. But so what we're really looking for is to make this approach as simple as possible, because that simple approach is going to allow the people that are part of our web development team, that lifecycle team, to be able to incorporate accessibility easily, and it can do it in such a way that it's not a heavy lift. It's just one more thing that they're able to do, but also gives them the resources so that they can learn it, turn around and apply it. And within doing that a few times, it starts to become second nature. And more importantly, it ends up in creating a more accessible experience that's a lot easier to maintain and cost a whole lot less to incorporate accessibility in. And in the long run, just reduces our overall risk exposure of having inaccessible content out there in the wild. So that's a little bit about how do we go about incorporating accessibility in a lot more effective fashion within our organization. But one of the things we mentioned earlier is that we wanted to do a demo so that you can see what inaccessible content, the experience that a person might have from having that inaccessible content versus accessible content might be. So we're going to turn it over to Greg now, and he's going to walk us through that demo. And so we encourage you to keep in mind that as he goes through this demo, imagine that you don't have any vision like Greg, and you really are relying on just that audio feedback to navigate. And that'll give you a much better appreciation for the demo that he's going to show us now.
Well, thanks, Jeff. So now I'm going to show a live experience of someone with a screen reader using a website. We're going to go over forms today. You're going to see an example of a good form and one that could use some improvement. So I am using a screen reader called NVDA. So that's non-visual desktop access. It is free for anyone to download and is one of the most popular Windows screen readers on the market. But what I'm going to do just to start out is just skim through this form so I know what I'm looking at. So I'll show you some of the labels. You're probably not going to hear every part of the label just to save time, but I want to give you just a spin of what a screen reader looks like, and then we'll walk through this together. So here we go. Let's get the show on the road.
Are you already a client of mine? Star grouping yes. Are you already a client of mine? Star grouping. No radio button not checked. Invalid entry client 2 of 2. Space. Checked. Prefix grouping. MR. Radio button not checked. First name star edit required. Invalid entry has autocomplete first blank. Prefix grouping. First name, last name star edit required. Invalid entry. Address star edit required. Invalid entry has. City star edit required. State star combo box Alabama collapse. Zip star edit required. Invalid primary phone number star edit required. Invalid entry. Other phone number edit has. Best time to call combo box morning collapse. Preferred contact method star grouping. Email address edit has autocomplete. Topics I'd like to discuss with you. Check all that apply. Star grouping. Retirement planning checkbox not checked. Retirement income strategies checkbox not checked. Education savings checkbox not checked. Estate planning strategies checkbox not checked. Required. Invalid and submit button. Recaptcha grouping. Recaptcha grouping. I'm not a.
So that is just a brief demo of what a screen reader should sound like when filling out a form. So let's walk through this together. Just going to go ahead and refresh the page real quick, and then
Contact Michael.
So one thing I like to do when I'm filling out forms is tabbing. So you might have heard a beep that you might have heard a couple beeps that tells me whether I'm in forms mode or not. So when I'm in forms mode, I tab through a form and then I interact with it using either the arrow keys or the keyboard, depending on the fields available, whether I need to interact with options or type in information, or whether I can use autocomplete, which is a really nice feature to get to fill forms faster. So let's just walk through this and I'll show you a couple of these labels and you'll see what a good form is supposed to be like. So remember, I'm going to tab through this. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to the first radio button and we'll get the show on the road.
Clickable. Are you already a client of mine? Star grouping. Yes. Radio button not checked. Required. Are you already a client of mine? Star grouping. No radio button not checked. Invalid entry client 2 of 2.
So you notice it actually says that it's required, and it also tells me that there's a star there. The star just basically says that a field is required. So I have to select one of these options. So I'll go ahead and select no, I'm not
Space.
a client.
Checked.
And now it's telling me that it's checked, which is good.
Prefix grouping. MR. Radio button not checked. Prefix. Space. Checked. First name star edit required. Invalid entry has autocomplete first blank.
So right here, it's telling me a lot of different things. So it's saying first name, and then it's saying the star, and it's giving me the required. And then it's saying invalid entry because I haven't put anything there yet. And it's required that I put something there. Because I want to fill this form out a little bit faster, I'm just going to go ahead and use an autocomplete function. So let's do that now.
Autofill list expanded. Greg N.E. Grogers at outloopbiz.co. Contact Michael Didion, Colorado Springs Co. Wells Fargo Advisors document. Last name star edit required has autocomplete lasts. Address star edit required has autocomplete address selected 41. City star edit required has state star combo box. Zip star edit required has autocomplete zip selected 68,127.
So I skipped over a little bit of the edits, but what you'll hear is what you're supposed to hear is it'll say zip. It'll tell me, whether it's required or not. If it's not required, it won't say anything. And then it'll actually tell me, it'll say edit, because it tells me the type of field that it is. And then you'll hear it tells me that I have something in there and what that is.
Primary phone number star edit required has autocomplete number selected. Other phone number edit has autocomplete other blank.
So there's nothing there, but there is something in this one.
Primary phone number star edit required has autocomplete number selected 402-616-174.
So, and one nice thing about this particular form is it doesn't matter which type of format you use. So that really makes it much easier to fill out. I want to tab through and I'll show you a combo box and they've implemented the combo boxes really well.
Other phone number edit has auto.
Let's talk through why.
Best time to call combo box morning collapsed call time.
So let's say I want to be called in the evening. Usually with most combo boxes, I have to either alt down arrow or push the down arrow to open it. And that's okay if I'm just at a point where I don't know the choices and I need to read all of those. But I can use first letter navigation here, and I'm going to go ahead and select E for evening.
E, evening.
There it is.
E, preferred contact method star grouping. Email radio.
And then here's another, it's reading the question and then it's saying, email or phone, one of two.
Phone radio button checked. Contact 2 of 2.
I'll go ahead and say phone.
Email address edit has autocomplete. Email selected grogers@outlookbiz.com.
So that's my email address.
Topics I'd like to discuss with you. Check all that apply. Star grouping retirement planning checkbox not checked. Required invalid entry retirement planning.
This is another different type of control, but it's basically telling me, because I don't have any of these check boxes checked yet. I'll go ahead and check this one, retirement planning.
Checked.
But it tells me the label. So I want to, this one is retirement planning. It also tells me the type of control. It's a checkbox, and it tells me the status, whether it's checked or unchecked, because it's associated with its field.
Retirement income strategies checkbox not checked. Retirement income checked. Education savings checkbox. Estate planning strategies checkbox not checked. Estate planning strategies.
So we notice that it's not saying invalid entry now because at least one or two of these is checked.
Access to credit and lending services available through affiliates star checkbox not checked. Credit and lending services available through Wells Fargo.
And then, and so now I'm ready to just go to the submit button. I know there's a CAPTCHA that I have to fill out. So, but to make things run a little bit faster, let's just go to the submit button. So I'll use the B to navigate by button.
Submit button.
There it is. And I want to do a shift tab.
Recaptcha grouping. I'm not a robot checkbox not checked.
So this is a really nice control because I can just check.
Unavailable.
Just check
Checked.
this. And then I'm not going to actually submit this control because this is a real life form. Now let's go to another form that maybe could use improvement. Remember, I like to tab through things because it makes things much faster. So I like to interact with the arrow keys and keyboard, but to navigate through the form, I like to use tab. So let's just refresh
Office
this.
supply. Order form Google Chrome. Office supply. Order form. Office supply. Order.
Let's go to the first
Banner.
form field on this page.
Main landmark form edit.
So let's start tabbing. You're going to hear that beep that says I'm entering into forms mode.
Main landmark. Form landmark. Edit blank. Edit has autocomplete blank. Edit has autocomplete blank. Edit has autocomplete blank.
So we can see all these labels are editors, but they're not associated with the fields. So when I'm tabbing, I don't really know what that is. I can figure out some of these fields just by using the autocomplete function if I wanted to, but it's better just to have the label so I can just navigate through it efficiently. It's also not telling me what fields are required. So I don't know what fields I have to do and which ones I don't have to. So in order for me to access this form, I will have to use the arrow keys and pop in and out of forms mode, which takes me 2 to 3 times as long and is a pretty painful experience. I'll show you what that looks like.
Combo box collapsed. Out of form banner. Main landmark form edit.
So I have to use the up arrow to see what they want here.
Name. Edit.
I'm also experiencing some inconsistent behavior. So
Edit has autocomplete blank.
So I've turned on my forms mode and I type in a name here.
G-R-E-G.
And I want to get out of forms mode by using the escape key because I'm going to have to arrow through this.
Address. Edit submenu has autocomplete Greg.
Okay, well, this is good. It actually saved it.
Address. Edit.
So in order for me to enter in information here, I have to get in and out of forms mode all of the time, which can be a really painful experience. And so that's just a demo of a form that works well and maybe one that could use some improvement. I just wanted to thank you guys for attending our presentation today. I know it's a lot to digest in 30 minutes, so I'll just give you a brief summary. So the first thing we talked about is just the different types of testers, how you can incorporate them, and sort of some best practices. So anyone from someone like myself who uses a screen reader to screen magnification software to various assistive technologies for folks who have dexterity challenges, including mouth sticks and head wands and voice command and various types of cursors. We've talked about appropriate ways to use folks for testing, and we gave a couple scenarios about environments that would work best. We talked about the importance of manual testing versus just simply doing automated testing to get a real world user experience. And then we talked about WebAlign, which provides not only better requirements for accessibility testing by simplifying the web content accessibility guidelines, but how it actually divides quality assurance into various roles, including testing, copy authors, developers, and user design folks. And then finally, we ended our presentation today with a demonstration of a real live experience using forms, a form that was effective in conveying what I needed and one that could use some improvement. Thank you so much.